Fridays with Thurber continues tonight with one of the classics. He wrote for more than 40 years, and nothing was ever better than one collection, recollection really, that came out in 1933, sometimes exaggerated but rooted terrifyingly in reality. My Life in Hard Times told of his life in Columbus, Ohio through his days at Ohio State University. And what days they were. I'm reading from the Library of America, Thurber Writings and Drawings, just reprinted largely because of your interest in reading him. I had intended to edit this one down for time, but it is just perfect as it is. Not one word is out of place. My compliments to the chef. So tonight, the first half of The Night the Ghost Got In by James Thurber. The ghost that got into the house on the night of November 17, 1915, raised such a hullabaloo of misunderstandings that I am sorry I didn't just let it keep on walking and go to bed. Its advent caused my mother to throw a shoe through a window of the house next door and ended up with my grandfather shooting a patrolman. I am sorry, therefore, as I have said, that I ever paid any attention to the footsteps. They began about 1:15 o'clock in the morning, a rhythmic, quick, cadenced walking around the dining room table. My mother was asleep in one room upstairs, my brother Herman in another. Grandfather was in the attic, in the old walnut bed which, as you will remember, once fell on my father. I had just stepped out of the bathtub and was busily rubbing myself with a towel when I heard the steps. They were the steps of a man walking rapidly around the dining room table downstairs. The light from the bathroom shone down the back steps, which dropped directly into the dining room. I could see the faint shine of plates on the plate rail. I couldn't see the table. The steps kept going round and round the table. At regular intervals, a board creaked when it was trod upon. I supposed at first that it was my father or my brother Roy, who had gone to Indianapolis but were expected home at any time. I suspected next that it was a burglar. It did not enter my mind until later that it was a ghost. After the walking had gone on for perhaps 3 minutes, I tiptoed to Herman's room. Psst, I hissed in the dark, shaking him. Up, he said in the low, hopeless tone of a despondent beagle. He always half suspected that something would get him in the night. I told him who I was. There's something downstairs, I said. He got up and followed me to the head of the back staircase. We listened together. There was no sound. The steps had ceased. Herman looked at me in some alarm. I had only the bath towel around my waist. He wanted to go back to bed, but I gripped his arm. There's something down there, I said. Instantly, the steps began, again, circled the dining room table like a man running, and started up the stairs toward us heavily, 2 at a time. The light still shone palely down the stairs. We saw nothing coming. We only heard the steps. Herman rushed to his room and slammed the door. I slammed shut the door at the stairs top and held my knee against it. After a long minute, I slowly opened it again. There was nothing there. There was no sound. None of us ever heard the ghost again. The slamming of the doors had aroused Mother. She peered out of her room. "What on earth are you boys doing?" she demanded. Herman ventured out of his room. "Nothing," he said gruffly, but he was, in color, a light green. "What was all that running around downstairs?" said Mother. So she had heard the steps, too. We just looked at her. "Burglars!" she shouted intuitively. I tried to quiet her by starting lightly downstairs. "Come on, Herman," I said. "I'll stay with Mother," he said. "She's all excited." I stepped back onto the landing. "Don't either of you go a step," said Mother. "We'll call the police." Since the phone was downstairs, I didn't see how we were going to call the police, nor did I want the police, but Mother made one of her quick, incomparable decisions. She flung up a window of her bedroom, which faced the bedroom windows of the house of a neighbor, picked up a shoe, and whammed it through a pane of glass across the narrow space that separated the two houses. Glass tinkled into the bedroom occupied by a retired engineer named Bodwell and his wife. Bodwell had been, for some years, in rather a bad way and was subject to mild attacks. Most everybody we knew or lived near had some kind of attacks. It was now about 2 o'clock of a moonless night. Clouds hung black and low. Bodwell was at the window in a minute, shouting, frothing a little, shaking his fist. "We'll sell the house and go back to Peoria," we could hear Mrs. Bodwell saying. It was some time before Mother got through to Bodwell. "Burglars!" she shouted. "Burglars in the house!" Herman and I hadn't dared to tell her that it was not burglars but ghosts, for she was even more afraid of ghosts than of burglars. Bodwell at first thought she meant there were burglars in his house, but finally he quieted down and called the police for us over an extension phone by his bed. After he had disappeared from the window, Mother suddenly made as if to throw another shoe. Not because there was further need of it, but as she later explained, because the thrill of heaving a shoe through a window glass had enormously taken her fancy. I prevented her. The police were on hand in a commendably short time. A Ford sedan full of them, 2 on motorcycles, and a patrol wagon with about 8 in it, and a few reporters. They began banging at our front door. Flashlights shot streaks of gleam up and down the walls, across the yard, down the walk between our house and Bodwell's. "Open up!" cried a hoarse voice. "We're men from headquarters." I wanted to go down and let them in since they were, but Mother wouldn't hear of it. "You haven't a stitch on," she pointed out. "You'd catch your death." I wound the towel around me again. Finally, the cops put their shoulders to our big, heavy front door with its thick, beveled glass and broke it in. I could hear a rending of wood and a splash of glass on the floor of the hall. Their lights played all over the living room and crisscrossed nervously in the dining room and stabbed into hallways and shot up the front stairs and finally up the back. They caught me standing in my towel at the top. A heavy policeman bounded up the steps. "Who are you?" he demanded. "I live here," I said. "Well, what's the matter? You hot?" he asked. It was, as a matter of fact, cold. I went to my room and pulled on some trousers. On my way out, another cop stuck a gun into my ribs. "What are you doing here?" he demanded. "I live here," I said. The officer in charge reported to Mother. "No sign of nobody, lady," he said. "Must have got away. What did he look like?" "There were 2 or 3 of them," Mother said, "whooping and carrying on and slamming doors." "Funny," said the cop. "All your windows and doors was locked on the inside, tight as a tick." Downstairs, we could hear the tromping of the other police. Police were all over the place. Doors were yanked open. Drawers were yanked open. Windows were shot up and pulled down. Furniture fell with dull thumps. A half-dozen policemen emerged out of the darkness of the front hallway upstairs. They began to ransack the floor, pulled beds away from walls, tore clothes off hooks in the closets, pulled suitcases and boxes off shelves. One of them found an old zither that Roy had won in a pool tournament. "Looky here, Joe," he said, strumming it with a big paw. The cop named Joe took it and turned it over. "What is it?" he asked me. "It's an old zither our guinea pig used to sleep on," I said. And that is where we will leave until next week and its conclusion. The Night the Ghost Got In by James Thurber.